Millions of votes have been cast for local councillors in England, Wales and Scotland, and a clutch of metro mayors. But what was in the minds of the voters? Was this the big rehearsal for the general election?
I understand Labour is preparing for a bloody night across Great Britain.
Will Emmanuel Macron be in the Elysée on Monday, and what would that mean for Brexit? We talked to his top economic advisor. Also tonight,
that's the place where mass execution took place. I could see the lines and rows of dead bodies. I knew it was the end, really, at that moment.
one of the few survivors of the Srebrenica massacre returns to take on genocide deniers.
I've seen the world's most experienced pluck on there.
And the Duke of Edinburgh is hanging up his hat at nearly 96 after 7 decades of public duties. Has he had a good life's work? Good evening. The ballot boxes were sealed half an hour ago after 35 local elections in England, in all Scottish and Welsh councils, and for 8 mayors in England. The results will be interpreted as a bellwether for the general election 5 weeks today. It's a key test for Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And although big Labour names like Andy Burnham may get the job he desperately wants, Mayor of Greater Manchester, it looks tonight like Labour are preparing for the worst. Our political editor Nick Watt has more on this, and he is here now. What are you hearing tonight?
Yes, I think Labour is braced for heavy losses across Great Britain. Now, polling experts have recently been saying that Labour should lose between 75 to 120 seats. Now, that's bad news for any opposition parties. Opposition parties shouldn't be losing seats in local council elections. But when front benchers hit the airwaves tomorrow, I think what we might be hearing from them is the losses will be much more dramatic than that. 300 to 400, and I think there'll be 2 explanations for that. The first one is the last time that these seats were fought, 2012 and 2013, Labour was on a high after the omnishambles budget, so they're bound to go back. And the projections that we've had in recent weeks have focused on England and haven't been taking account of the fact that we should see, we have elections obviously in Scotland and Wales. Let me, though, sound a note of caution. Parties do tend to embark on expectation management. They say things are going to be really dreadful, so when they're merely dreadful, it's a slightly rosier picture.
But give me some examples.
Well, I think there's a feeling that Labour is braced for a loss of the iconic Glasgow City Council to the SNP. That will obviously capture headlines, but in a sense it is aligning Glasgow City Council with the Holyrood and the Westminster elections.
In itself very symbolic.
Yeah, the West Midlands mayoral contest, that should be a Labour heartland, but the feeling is that that is on a knife edge and turnout is really low, which is going to be very bad for Labour. But there's the odd ray of sunshine. Andy Burnham should win in Greater Manchester, the contest there. His mate Steve Rotherham should win in Liverpool. And tomorrow night, when we get the projected national share from the local elections, I think what Labour will hope is that that will show a narrower gap between them and the Tories than you're seeing in the opinion polls.
And tell me about the Tories. What are you hearing?
Well, I think the Tories are expecting gains of between sort of 50 and 80 in the English local elections. If it's more than that, they'll be happy. If it's many more than that, they will be jumping for joy. Perish the thought, though, that there's any expectation management. They will be saying that they did better than expected when those seats were contested last time, so little room for improvement for them, they say.
Nick, looking forward to tomorrow. Well, back to the general election now, and the Conservatives' ambitions in particular. At the last election, pundits were caught out by inaccurate polls, but there were clues elsewhere for those that were looking. An examination of the seats where top Tories were campaigning might have helped shed some light. So, in an effort to learn from our mistakes, our policy editor Chris Cook has been mapping the party leaders' movements in the campaign so far. Here's his unique analysis of what they show.
Now, my friends, are we going to get Mohammed elected?
Yes! The critical fight at this election remains, as it has done for a century, the battle between the Conservatives and Labour. The parties have already started a flurry of campaigning, with Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn crisscrossing Britain to get their faces in local media. So, what can we tell about the two parties from what they're up to? We're used to talking about swings, so a simple 5% swing from Labour to the Tories would mean 43 more Conservative seats, and a 4% swing from the Tories to Labour would mean 29 more Labour seats, making Labour the largest party in a hung parliament. But UKIP is likely to break this maths, because its voters keep moving to the Tories, so we probably need something a bit more complicated than a swingometer. So, how about this? Bear with me now, I'll explain. On this graph, we've plotted all the Labour-Tory battlegrounds. Each dot is a constituency, and we've arranged them by the results they got in 2015. The furthest left dots are the safest Labour seats from 2015, and the furthest right dots are the safest Tory seats. The most marginal ones are the ones in the middle. Now, looking vertically, the higher up dots are seats where UKIP got a higher vote share. So let's take this seat here. This is Dagenham and Rainham, John Cruddis's seat. It has a 7,000 vote Labour lead over the Tories. That's safe, it's far to the left. But it's a place with 13,000 UKIP voters. That's a lot, so it's high up. It's one of the seats where UKIP voters breaking Tory could break a Labour MP on their own. In fact, let's draw a line in here on this graph. All of the seats above this line, more than 60 of them, are ones where, if the UKIP vote goes Tory, it would be enough to flip the seat to the Conservatives on their own. So you can see why it's strategically helpful for Theresa May to take a very hard line on the EU.
Threats against Britain have been issued by European politicians and officials. All of these acts have been deliberately timed to affect the result of the general election that will take place on the 8th of June.
There's a huge reward for hoovering up UKIP votes. Remember that when you look at these rosettes. They mark constituencies where Theresa May has campaigned. Now, a few stops in Tory seats, but most are deep into Labour heartlands. Note though, she's chosen Labour seats where attracting ex-UKIPers can do most or all of the work of winning. What then of Labour? Jeremy Corbyn's campaign style is certainly very different. So though is his choice of seat. These red rosettes, marking Mr Corbyn's recent stops, are mostly in seats with relatively slender Tory leads. Labour will need to take harder seats than the bulk of these to form a government. Now it's possible Labour simply plans to do that in a few weeks' time. Let's wait. The Tory campaign stops, though, are more revealing. They show the Conservatives' plan to ride a wave of ex-UKIPers right into Labour's heartland.
Chris Cook reporting. Emmanuel Macron was widely regarded as having bested Marine Le Pen in last night's vicious television presidential debate, in which she called him a spoilt, cold-eyed, smirking banker, and he branded her a hate-filled liar. But after the venomous battle that lasted almost 3 hours, a billet doux for Macron from the last American president.
I have admired the campaign that Emmanuel Macron has run. He has stood up for liberal values. He put forward a vision for the important role that France plays in Europe and around the world. And he is committed to a better future for the French people. He appeals to people's hopes and not their fears. Because of how important this election is, I also want you to know that I am supporting Emmanuel Macron to lead you forward. En marche. Vive la France.
But does the fact that Barack Obama is rooting for him only reinforce the elitist tag and demonstrate that this renegade presidential candidate is really the establishment man? I'm joined now from Paris by Jean Pisani-Ferry, who's coordinating Macron's economic programme and whose political and personal heritage is entwined with the development of the European Union. He's been described as Macron's éminence grise. Good evening, Mr. Pisani-Ferry. First of all, on that point, when Barack Obama intervened in Brexit, it was counterproductive. Is the Obama video not risky? Because it looks like Macron, who claims not to be an establishment candidate, very much is.
Well, I wouldn't regret President Obama's short video. What he said is really, genuine. He says what Macron stands for. He said he stands for hope and not for fear. I think it's exactly that. And President Obama has a very strong image with the French public overall. So definitely I wouldn't regret.
I wonder what voters it might sway, because how do you explain that many Mélenchon-Fillon supporters would rather abstain or vote blanc than vote for Macron?
We're going through, you know, a realignment in French politics, and this is extremely impressive what we're seeing. We're seeing that about 25% of the voters chose candidates from established parties, and 75% for candidates whose party were barely represented in parliament. So we're seeing something really new. We still have to understand what it means. Definitely there is a divide across within the electorate between those who stands for more openness, who have hopes, who see opportunities, and those who are more fearful of the evolution. That's something we've seen elsewhere, but it seems, and we do hope, that it will turn differently in the French case.
Well, you are such a key part of Emmanuel Macron's campaign and his plans for government. And I wonder if you yourself are saying the divide is so huge, what can Macron do, to bring on side the 40% of French voters who are so far to the right?
Macron is going to, you know, if he wins, he's going to win on the basis of those who in the first round voted for him, plus those from the left and the right who do not want at all Marine Le Pen to be the next president. Now, he will have to implement an agenda of significant change because the underlying situation we're living is deeply unsatisfactory, and this election is an expression also of the deep dissatisfaction of and the fears of a significant fraction of the French voters.
Well, of course,
So
now what's going to happen? But if he wins, one of his first big jobs is having to deal with Brexit. Now, he is reported as saying that Brexit's a crime. It's a crime for the UK to leave, and they'll be facing servitude. You know, a lot of heat has been in this divorce bill now, and I wonder, what does Emmanuel Macron think the UK should pay in that divorce?
He's going to, you know, size with the 27. There will be a tough negotiation about Brexit, about its implications, about the terms, the financial terms, but also the economic terms.
Sorry.
And
it's such a short time we have. I just want to ask you, do you think that Emmanuel Macron's position is nearer the 60 billion or is it nearer the 100 billion we were hearing about last week?
Emmanuel Macron will, I don't think he will differ significantly from the French position, and I don't want to enter the detail at this stage. You were asking me about the significance of the French vote and the agenda Emmanuel Macron is going to put forward in France, and I think he will start from there because primarily he will be elected to change the French situation, the French economy, and the social situation we're seeing. So I think that will be his domestic focus. Now, he's really pro-European. Europe is part of his agenda. He wants Europe to be part of the solution, and that's really something also quite different from what we've seen in the UK, but also quite different from what we've seen in France in the past, where French government were a bit lukewarm about Europe.
Thank you very much indeed. The Srebrenica massacre in July 1995 was one of the most dreadful acts of the Bosnian War. More than 8,000 Muslim Bosniak boys and men were murdered by units of the Bosnian Serb army under Ratko Mladic, who captured the designated safe area supposedly under UN protection. The verdict in Mladic's trial in The Hague, where he is charged with genocide, is expected later this year. Just 6 men survived the massacre and escaped. One of them continues to fight for justice and has returned to live in the town most associated with ethnic cleansing. Katie Razo went to Srebrenica for this special report into his battle to take on those who say genocide never happened. We should warn you that her film includes graphic scenes from the time which many viewers may find distressing.
We didn't believe that we would be killed because there were so many people and I couldn't believe that they could kill all of us.
In July 1995, Bosnian Serb soldiers shot dead thousands of unarmed Muslim men and boys in Srebrenica. It was Europe's worst atrocity since the Second World War.
I had nightmares that I didn't ever get rid of it.
But today, the genocide verdicts of the International Court are being questioned by politicians and the town's new mayor, even here where the massacres took place.
Da se dokaže I da istina u Srebrenici nije dokazana.
The genocide didn't happen. That's official politics. Today we fight for justice. It isn't finished.
Nedjad Avdic returned to Srebrenica 10 years ago. He and his wife Elvisa are bringing up their 3 daughters in what became Republika Srpska, the Bosnian Serb entity within Bosnia-Herzegovina. Nedjad is one of its believed only 6 survivors out of around 8,000 killed in July 1995.
I had a need deeply inside me to come here, to show them that I survived.
His return after the war was a gesture of defiance against those who wanted Muslims erased. But he says life is becoming increasingly difficult.
I'm worried because of discourse and the rhetoric here in Bosnia, especially in the last few years. We have new indoctrinated generations of children. Everywhere you have propaganda, and because of that my wife, she just wants to leave Srebrenica.
During the war, Srebrenica became a UN safe haven, packed with fleeing Bosnian Muslim refugees, including Elvisa and, separately, 17-year-old Nedjad. But the UN abandoned them in 1995 when Bosnian Serb forces besieged the town. Do you remember the feeling?
Yes, everything. It's painful to remember that.
The leader of the Bosnian Serb forces, General Ratko Mladic, now on trial for genocide in The Hague, promised civilians safe passage. Women and children like Elvisa were bussed out. The men were told they'd follow.
Evo pogledajte oko njegovi, ovi svi djedovi, ovi svi dječaci, ovo niko nije došao. Niko nije preživio.
Nedjad took us on the journey he made back in 1995. Then, as a prisoner, crammed into a truck with dozens of others, their hands tied behind their backs.
That's the place where mass execution took place. I could see the lines and rows of dead bodies. I knew it was the end, really, at that moment. They ordered us to lay down, and I just thought, oh, my mother would never knew where I ended up, how I finished, and then they started a fire, and I was dying, and I just could hear moans of other people who were wounded. It was so painful. I just prayed with God to die. And then I noticed someone was moving in front of me, and I saw, and I asked him, "Are you alive?" He said, "Yes, I'm alive, come and tie me." It's enough. No, yeah, I can show you something else. Yeah, but before security could come.
The pair escaped when the soldiers went to collect more men to kill. Nejad was badly wounded and in terrible pain. As day broke and they crawled through the forest, the full scale and planning behind the massacre became apparent. After the war, the international effort to find and identify the missing thousands began, in amongst them Nejad's father and uncle.
I know for my uncle that his remains were found in 4 mass graves. They wanted to hide it and excavated them and reburied them again, and because of that they broken their bodies.
Događaj u Srebrenici što se toga tiče za mene I za Republiku Srpsku nije genocid.
The current president of Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, doesn't accept the international court verdicts when it comes to Srebrenica. Here, they celebrate convicted war criminals like the former president Radovan Karadzic as heroes. The wartime general Ratko Mladic is still on trial. But so far, 6 senior figures have been found guilty of genocide by the Hague War Crimes Court. When Radovan Karadzic's second-in-command was released from prison a few years ago, he was feted.
Tim zadnjih par godina, možda 2, 3, sve više I više je toga ovdje. Šta mogu da nam učine, da nam otežaju, oni to čini.
No longer a predominantly Muslim town, the scars of war are still visible in Srebrenica today. Last year, the town elected a new mayor who's promised economic development. It's the first time a Bosnian Serb has filled the role since the war. But his views on the Srebrenica massacre have caused alarm amongst some of the Bosniaks who've returned.
Do you believe Radovan Karadzic is a hero?
Pa vjerujem. Iz razloga što da nije bilo Radovana Karadzića u mirnodopskom, dakle pre rata, kada je stvorena Republika Srpska, vjerovatno ne bi postojala više Republika Srpska I vjerovatno bi se bili tragičniji sukobi I pogubniji po srpski narod kada su u pitanju ovi prostori, odnosno ovaj prostor Republike Srpske.
Do you accept the judgment of the International Court that genocide happened in Srebrenica?
Ne. Slažem se da je, to sam uvijek I govorio, slažem se da je bio zločin, ali kvalifikacija je sporna. Kvalifikacija genocida je sporna. I isto tako znam da je na isti način ubijan I srpski narod, ali se nije okarakterisalo kao genocid.
Some argue the Balkan War is a frozen conflict, that Republika Srpska's ruling politicians still want to set up the entirely separate Bosnian Serb state they didn't achieve through violence. With international eyes focused elsewhere, President Dodik regularly threatens a referendum on the entity ceding from Bosnia-Herzegovina. His mayor in Srebrenica isn't averse to that idea.
A ako bi bolji život bio da se jednostavno odvoji Republika Srpska od federacije I da onaj ko želi da živi u Republici Srpskoj, da li to bio Bošnjak ili Hrvat ili Srbi ili ostali, da tu ostane da živi, a oni isto tako koji žele da žive u federaciji, da li su to Srbi ili ostali narodi, I ako je to funkcionalnije I ako to može na miran način da se uradi, ja sam za takvu soluciju.
With the mood changing, Nejad and Elvisa told me they already know Bosniaks who've packed up and left. Elvisa would like to follow them.
If you leave, who will be the winner?
In that case, the genocide would pay off. Those who committed such horror, they would win.
Every year on the anniversary, more men are buried in the vast Potocari memorial to the genocide victims of Srebrenica. Sometimes a bone fragment is all that's been found. And for 22 years, Nejad has carried the burden of being one survivor living in place of thousands. Amongst the dead, the father to whom he never got to say goodbye.
Just reminds me of last moment when I lost father in the and the chaos.
I wondered, based on his experiences, whether Nejad has a warning about where unchecked nationalism can lead.
We had a normal country. Hatred, nationalistic conversation can take us to the war, and after that to the killing. Very often I ask myself where we are going now, because I see very bad things in Europe.
And what of true reconciliation here, where genocide is denied in the very place it's judged to have happened?
Those who had their hands bloody, if they are come one day and ask for forgiveness, I think that it wouldn't be a problem for us to extend our hands.
Do you think they ever will?
For now, though, the divisions, in a country apparently still so split along ethnic lines, look almost as wide as ever.
Katie Razzle there. You can see a longer version of that film on Our World on the BBC News channel at 9:30 on Saturday and Sunday night, and of course on the iPlayer. Now the part of the programme that delivers a verbal punch. We've been devoting Newsnight to provocative ideas for the party manifestos. Tonight that task falls to writer Afua Hirsch, whose strong words for faith schools.
Abolish faith schools. They harm integration. Britain has a problem with integration. All our political parties agree, but instead of any serious long-term policies, the response has been confined to contrived and often patronising measures. Ethnic minority and immigrant communities are lectured about British values, and we may all have to start swearing an oath of allegiance. The glaring hypocrisy of our integration agenda is that our most important public institutions actively encourage segregation. Faith schools make up 1/3 of all schools in Britain. Our government is proposing that they have even more power to discriminate by selecting more of their places based on religious belief. Public funds are being used to separate children by faith. What could be more damaging to integration? Faith schools are also segregating children by class. 1/4 of faith primary schools have fewer disadvantaged pupils than those of no faith. Faith schools are the antithesis of a secular society, but have never been so popular. Some parents are strategically using religious identities as a proxy for ethnicity, deliberately educating their children with others from similar backgrounds. But the main reason for the popularity of faith schools is that many outperform other state schools in academic results. We would never accept this kind of segregation in any other public service. Why is it acceptable in schools? We need to be honest about the role of faith and education in an integrated society and keep the two separate.
The Duke of Edinburgh, whose retirement from public duties was announced today, had a traumatic early life. He was evacuated from Greece in an orange box for a cot when he was 18 months old. Perhaps that early resilience has fueled him through his eventful 96 years, during which, as consort, he's carried out approximately 23,000 solo public duties and courted a measure of controversy along the way. So what do we expect from brand monarchy by way of public duty and public service, and has Prince Philip genuinely delivered it? I'm joined now by the Royal Correspondent of the Sunday Times, Royal Nika, and also by Sean Fay, who is a writer and activist. First of all, Roya, do you think the royals are the kind of essence of what you think is public duty and service?
I think Prince Philip certainly is. I mean, this is a man who for 70 years has dedicated his life to supporting women, which frankly is an extraordinary service he's done to this nation and to the monarch. And he's done it, yes, with a degree of, forthrightness and humour, but he's done it very quietly as well. He's achieved an enormous amount in public life through his charities that he's done very quietly, not bang the drum about. And I think his sort of steadfastness and commitment to the cause and the monarchy is pretty extraordinary over 70 years.
Sean, that point about charities, I mean, he's patron of something like almost 780 charities, and I wonder, those charities clearly thought that it was a benefit to them having his support.
Yes, and I think to an extent that is, you know, an important part of what the monarchy plays in public life. I suppose my query of that is that we've come to accept the presence of the monarchy as a almost depoliticised mascot for the nation and for the charitable sector, and you know that allows us to depoliticise other issues like austerity and some of the social issues that, you know, it can be very good to have a royal attached to a cause, but not to look necessarily at the underlying political causes.
But there are some things and some causes to which he was attached that are of themselves not necessarily political, but actually just causes which are for the greater benefit of the nation.
Yes, they are, but then equally, his position in respect of that, and when we talk about his service, I think it's important to remember that service, it's discussed quite sort of, on the news as if it's sort of given fully willingly, but there isn't a huge amount of privilege that he receives, in return for that service.
The point about privilege is obviously that, the Queen was born into it, but he wasn't. He had to kind of come into it. And I suppose in that sense, then, he inherited, by way of marriage, that sense of privilege.
Yes, he inherited a sense of privilege, but he also inherited having to give up his career. You know, this was a man who, this is in the 1950s, it was generally assumed and believed that people in the Navy, he would have gone right to the top of the Navy. How many men in the 1950s were willing to get up for a woman? Yes, of course, he was actually born into privilege, but also I don't think we should look at Duke of Edinburgh and think of him as an incredibly privileged man. He has led a privileged life, but he's done an enormous amount of work at the same time, and I think he's very conscious of his position and his privilege.
I mean, for example, things like the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, for example, which has helped young people right across the social strata.
Yes, I never got my bronze.
You never got your bronze.
No.
But you see, the very fact that you know about it, you still think about it, you didn't get your bronze, but was it something that actually was worth getting?
Yes, I mean, certainly, and there are plenty of examples of that. The younger royals speaking out on mental health recently. Yes. I think it should give us pause for thought that we are actually saying, we can say something like Prince Philip isn't a privileged man and that he's worked hard his whole life. There are plenty of people that work hard their entire lives and do sacrifice and work hard. And I think that with the royals, those kind of sacrifices are certainly elevated into a unique way in the way that we discuss them.
But you could also say that lots of celebrities who, for whatever reason, because they're good at football or they're modelling or whatever, you get a lot of money.
Yes, they do.
And they're in a huge position of privilege. And they don't necessarily give back in the same way that you might regard someone that's actually been doing it for 70 years.
Yeah, but I would say that the monarchy is a pretty unique institution in that in this country it's the product of a caste system that still shapes this country, and it has been forming over hundreds of years, and it's also enriched by colonial spoils. We had a huge empire that was still in its final days.
We do, but the issue with that is, the public, if they wanted to, could probably get rid of the monarchy, but every year when the nation is polled, they are overwhelmingly in favour of keeping a monarchy.
And one assumes that although he's not in public duties, though there may be exceptions, that he'll also still be working behind the scenes with the Queen.
There's no doubt that he's going to be working with her every single day and supporting her still.
Thank you both very much indeed. What's it like to be the Labour candidate in a general election when you think your leader is a disaster, in a seat which has a proud history of building nuclear-powered submarines, when your leader is ambivalent at best to nuclear? Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria was solidly Labour after the war until 1983, when Labour, under Michael Foot, campaigned for unilateral nuclear disarmament and lost the seat to the Conservatives. When Labour changed its policy, it took the seat back. But what now for Barrow-in-Furness? High up on the Tory target list, filmmaker Nick Blakemore spent the first week of the campaign with the candidates there.
I have a big dilemma, as a lot of people in this constituency are going to have this election. A vote for Labour is a vote for Corbyn to be Prime Minister.
I don't think he would be fit to be Prime Minister, even if it were possible that it was going to happen. I want to be the Labour candidate, but I'm not prepared to accept even the theoretical possibility that he will be Prime Minister, because one, it's not going to happen, but two, it wouldn't be right even if he did.
I I'm just really asking how you're planning to vote in the general election, how you're feeling about it at the moment.
I used to support Labour, but I don't know at the moment.
You're not sure at the moment?
My daughter's a single parent and that, and it's hard for her.
Yeah, I mean,
she doesn't get the support that she should. Yeah. So, I mean, she's working as well, so it is really hard for her.
How do we get people to vote for you when you are so blatantly anti the leader, the elected leader, forgive me, of the party which I believe you represent, or have you gone independent?
I don't want to be in this position. I don't want to put anyone, I don't want to be against my party leader.
I'm proud to support Corbyn. He's got a reputation of marching for CND, he's got a proud reputation of being for peace and against war.
The policies that have come to the fore under Corbyn are what I personally feel motivate me. And I feel it have motivated a lot of people.
I think that a business as usual election where the candidate goes in and they either say nice things about the leader, or they just try desperately not to mention him on the doorstep and hope that other people don't bring him up, was just doomed to fail.
I thought that was a good meeting, actually, because lots of people came down, and they were, and party members in particular. There were people who weren't happy with what I'd said about Jeremy Corbyn. There were actually also party members who robustly agreed with it, but all of them in that meeting at the end said yes, they were going to vote for me to vote Labour. So actually that is showing a level of coming together.
Theresa May has been very smart, and where she's been particularly smart is she's letting people believe that she's going to deliver some big Brexit iceberg in 2 years' time. I think she's going to deliver an ice cube. Brexit will still mean Brexit, but it'll be small enough to put in a gin and tonic.
Well, they were they're enough, polite enough, but they're pretty adamant. They said they'd refund the money.
Alan, where are we going right now? What's going on?
As I understand it, the Abbey Hotel in Barrow has rather shamefully and pitifully closed the venue because we were about to meet or hear from a lady called Anne-Marie Waters, and for whatever reason they decided to pull it. So we're going to see if we can change their minds. She's the lady who has a bit of a thing about... is it Sharia, what do you call it? Colin will know.
Sharia watch.
Sharia watch, that's it, yes. Hello, can I help you?
I'm just wondering, Collingwood.
Hi there.
I was wondering if this event's been cancelled this afternoon?
It has been cancelled, yeah.
On what grounds?
The conference and events managers cancelled that for us. I don't know the circumstances, I'm afraid.
But we paid...
But it won't be taking place today.
Can you legally do that?
Of course I can.
Okay. Can they legally do that, do you think?
No idea, I guess so. But it's rather short notice. Somebody's come a long way to talk to us about stuff. It just seems rather odd.
I'm very sorry about that, gents. But the event won't be taking place at Abbey House Hotel.
That's a very good example of what we're up against.
Which is what?
Who's the biggest?
So I'm the candidate for the Conservatives at the general election.
Well, that's who I'll be voting for.
Well, thank you. Can I ask, have you been a Conservative voter all your life, or?
More or less.
I believe in, more than anything else, a small state, people being able to get on with their own lives without the burden of government telling them what to do. But I was just wondering, have you made your mind up which way you might be going? Or?
That won't be for you, I'm afraid.
Oh.
I've got deep-rooted socialist background, so I'm afraid I won't be voting
Nothing we can do to win you over.
Absolutely nothing, I'm afraid.
Everyone's in a tough position because of the economic mess that the coalition inherited. But actually you can't get into a decent position unless you've got a strong and stable economy.
How do you deliver efficiency when £200 million worth of cuts have been imposed?
Well, I think you have to look at where services are being replicated, you have to look at where services can be shared, because let's make no bones about it, we are still in a difficult financial situation across the UK, but in Cumbria as well.
FGM. I have a daughter, by the way, 14. But, if FGM stood for female god manipulation, I could probably be talked into it, but it doesn't. That was a little joke then, you missed it, sorry.
Firstly, I'd just like to thank the Lisdooney Hotel for saving us in the 11th hour. I'd also like to congratulate Mr Alan Piper for being selected unanimously to stand for UK to the Baron Phillips Parliamentary on the 8th of June. Congratulations, Alan.
Thank you.
I've been called every far-right fascist racist under the sun, just for telling the truth. If we don't really do something about FGM now, we never will. I don't think that Muslims' opinions on things are the only important opinions.
Now, we're not going to cure Sharia in 7 weeks. I don't disagree at all with what you're saying about it. Right, well, why would I? I have a 14-year-old daughter. But our target on June the 8th is May, because we have got to convince the electorate in this country to vote Brexit, and if you've got somebody who is not solid Brexit, do not vote for them, because do not trust that cow.
There's lots of claims about we're all in it together and we're all citizens and we're all working together, but some of us are in this a lot deeper than others, and that's how people feel in Barrow. My name's Lorraine Birchall, I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. I don't feel that this area should be forgotten. You don't vote? OK, thanks for your time. Yeah, it's someone we would hope to work on with literature and convince him of the value of voting.
I feel that we need to put up a candidate to give people in this area a green choice. This is a worst period for so many people. The number of people using food banks, the number of homeless on the streets.
Barrow in particular is dependent on BAE as a source of employment, and people are saying they wouldn't vote Green because the Greens are opposed to BAE.
We see the potential for something amazing to happen at the shipyard. We just don't happen to believe that building weapons of mass destruction is a good thing.
The thing is, if Labour get in, can he stop Dryden?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. That is why I've decided to be honest about this.
21, please, Mel. That's
what I think is not in the interest of areas like here and areas right across the north of England and beyond, is to have this sort of Tory whitewash where there are no Labour voices to stand up for our communities. So that is a message we're trying to get across on the doorstep. Don't know if it's going to work yet.
And we'll have all the big political results tomorrow night. Until then, good night.
Hello there. There'll be a bit of a frost